I want to give you an idea a little bit about, we heard a lot of talk in the morning about change, and we need this changed and that changed. This is a real life story, what it takes to change things. And I came here 13 years ago now. I was a young, good-looking fellow, see what's left. In order to change a practice of handling organics and manure, and a friend of mine that I happen to know from my previous work in Germany in this field lived in Fort McLeod, and we are in southern Alberta. And if you guys are around when they start to land apply hog manure in Picture Butte, you better close your windows in a 50-kilometer radius. And that kind of environment was the ground here for us to think about doing something different. The friend that I now know tricked me into the country because he promised me this will take a couple years and you can go home. So he tricked me. It's 13 years later and I'm still here, so something went wrong along that path. I represent Lethbridge Biogas. We operate now for the last 3 years Alberta's biggest biogas cogeneration facility. We are taking energy out of organic waste, and David said it in his presentation. This is also, it's not only an electricity story in our case, it is an environmental cleanup story, and that's often the mistake we make when we talk about how you can generate electricity and how cheap you can generate electricity. In our case, I often get asked, so how do you compare to wind and how do you compare to solar? And I said, I don't. That's not the answer they want. But what I'm saying by that is biomass and biogas is one of those things that can complement wind and solar very good because we're generating base load, we're running 24/7, we don't have an intermittency issue. We at the same time do something for waste management and cleanup, which solar and wind do not. So if I throw numbers around, I ask the guy what he wants to hear, and then he can get the number because I can allocate other costs to the other things that we do, right? So that's a little bit. We're not comparing apples to apples. And the question in the morning that we had, how do we make this all happen? There's a very simple answer to that. We have to create an environment that capital is attracted to those kind of things. Because if capital is attracted to those kind of things, then we can make them work. And there's various things how to do that. But that's what we have to create, an environment where these things can make money. So you sensed a little bit when I said earlier I came here in 2004. Actually, I was here in 2003 at this very venue to talk about the same thing. And that's 13 years ago. We are one of those overnight success stories in bioenergy. And I have a couple of colleagues that work on bioenergy developments. And they often come to me and say, you know, Stefan, you've been through this. We can't get this done. What are we doing wrong? And then I look at him and I said, so how long are you working at this? And he says, 5 years. I said, great, you're not doing anything wrong. Wait 3 more and you're there. and that's about, sorry?
You're very generous, 10 years.
So the idea to do this biogas plant in Lethbridge was actually born in 2001, believe it or not. I was here for the first time in Canada for this project on 9/11, believe it or not. And I got stuck because the airports were closed down in the Lethbridge area. And the friend that I was talking to, the one that tricked me, he took me to, because we didn't have anything else to do, he took me to Waterton Lakes National Park because his parents had a cabin there. And I think that's when I fell in love with this area. And when he finally said, you want to come over for these couple of years, that's why I came. But that's how this all got started. And there's a couple of things here that don't mean a lot to me, to you. But it was a 10-year process to get from an idea that this makes sense in this area to actually, you see 2011, there's a yellow light to start off construction. So a decade to put a shovel in the ground. So I get a lot of questions from people. So, Stefan, what did you do? I mean, I assume you went skiing 90 days over the winter, and then you spent the rest of the time fly fishing somewhere else. So you must have not really worked on this. But I have worked full time on this project since 2004, and things just take long when a system is not really set up to accommodate change. That's really the message. We were doing something that was not in the cards, so to speak, and it starts with, why is it not in the cards? And I called this slide Alberta Challenges, but you might as well call it Canadian Challenges. And it starts with the perception that, you know, we don't really need this. 10 years ago, and we might think a little different today, but 10 years ago, do we really need this, right? We have resources. Do we really have a waste management problem, right? I mean, I'm from Europe. Everything is populated, everything is dense. People live close to landfills, right? If I go down to Lethbridge and ask, do a little survey and ask 100 people if they really actually would know where the landfill is in Lethbridge, you would be surprised that probably 55 would say, do we have a landfill? So what I'm saying by that is there's no visible pressing issue that would force us or cause us to think a little differently. So as a consequence, you can go through that circle. Political support for this has been uncoordinated, scattered. This is something that's difficult to establish, to implement, to really want to deal with this. We ran into a lot of snags in the regulatory system because we went to the people that we thought could help us, and we said, you know, we want to do this and this and this. So what do we have to do to get a permit? And we were looked at and said, you want to do what? Yeah, well, we want to take waste, and then we want to do this. Well, you know, we don't really have rules for you. Which you, in the first place, you think, this is good. But it's not. And I'm going to tell you why it's not. Because people that then are responsible to permit where there's no rules, they will look for some rules they find. They're up here. They don't always fit. They don't look for the, well, you know, we let you do what you want to do. We had to do things in Lethbridge that are to a higher standard than, for example, a tailings pond is in the oil sands. We had to put secondary containment around our facility that was pulled out of the air from petroleum rules, because there was no rules for manure storage other than agricultural rules, which are essentially no rules. But we were not really agriculture, so manure storage out of agriculture, no rules, right? So that's what I'm saying. So legal framework is not developed. You're running into very interesting stories, I can tell you that. I talked about that. When you look into that, and this hasn't really changed at all, except for some little modifications that we were able to achieve. You are on your own. You have to at least deal with 4 or 5 or 6 different regulatory agencies that will all look at you and say, you know, not good. And it's a nightmare to get there. My most favorite story, which is not so much a regulatory story, which is the next thing you're running into the not in my backyard issue, because people generally like the idea if you say, you know, we take waste and you don't throw it away, and then we're taking it and we're making energy and this is all good. Oh, great idea. Where do you want to do that? Oh, it's about 1,500 meters from your home. Right? In Europe, if you go to Europe, Germany comes up always as an example. We have showed pictures. These facilities are in a couple hundred meters of urban centers. Nothing to it. There's rules around it. We had neighbors in 1,400 meters that were up in arms, and I was personally attacked on open houses we had from crying mothers, and this is not a joke, that blamed me for the fact that because our facility is polluting and is making industrial noise and is polluting waters, no understanding whatsoever, I was accused that the children cannot swim in this beautiful lake anymore. If you ever Google Jail Lake on Google Maps, you will find that it is behind a prison. With trespassing signs, no trespassing signs all around it, right? So that's how creative people get when they don't want things to happen. The decade that I didn't spend skiing, I mean, I did a couple runs, but just a couple facts here. We took clients, potential project partners to all over Europe, visited more than 50 biogas plants in more than 10 countries to show that we're not crazy, right? This is all happening somewhere else. It's not just, it's only not happening here, and there's reasons for that. So look how that looks over there. And at the time we were not fortunate enough to have a facility close. Now that people want to do that, they can point to Lethbridge and they can say, you know what, it'll look similar to what Lethbridge did. So we had to go overseas, right? We lost a lot of money along the way from federal provincial grants there because we just could not close the deals we had. And this is a remarkable story. We had three times actually, investors and partners signing on the bottom line, big utilities out of the province among them. By the way, I won't name them. Typically I throw out the first capital of the name of the company and then everybody's laughing, so I'm not doing that today. But we had that a couple times, then in the last minute a decision came along, you know, maybe this is premature. Do we really want to be in that green space, you know? If I talk to the same people today, 5 years later, 6 years later, oh, Stefan, you know, we still talk about you. I said, and I say, you know, I hope this is a good thing that you're talking about. He says, yeah, we're talking about this lost opportunity that we had 5 years ago. So, too late now, but the most remarkable story actually that I wouldn't know if I would probably not speak in front of you for sure here. After all this decade to meet construction deadlines and whatsoever, we beat the final deadline that had to do with some funding by a week. Right? So I mean, that was great timing in the 10-year process that the very last minute it was ready to fall apart, but we made it by a minute. So what did we actually do? You have a aerial view here of the facility. It is quite a footprint. You see well, I wouldn't say it's the Berlin Wall because that came down, but you see the wall around the tank farm there. That's the secondary containment. The whole facility, all these tanks, we had to dig out that containment, double line it with a clay liner and a synthetic liner because what we're doing is so toxic, right? You have to remember that. And no tailings pond has that, by the way. So that's our facility. That's the end result that we are pretty proud of today. It generates, to put it in perspective, here you see these little generators here, the CHP, combined heat and power units at the very bottom. It generates 2.85 megawatts, which in the context of 16,000 megawatt generation capacity in the province of Alberta, very tiny. But if you put it in perspective and say, you know, these 2.85 megawatts 24/7 will power the need of a little rural town of 3,000 people. All of a sudden, it's not so small anymore. I don't want to go too much into technical details. Anaerobic digestion works on the principle of keeping organic waste in an oxygen-free environment at a certain temperature. That's why what we do in these tanks. We use the waste heat from these engines to heat our own process. And we put the electricity. You see these power poles here. This one was put in for us to interconnect. Looks very simple, but it's another story how to get there. So we're putting on a regular basis 90% of what we produce on site into the grid. The other 10% will power the facility. What are we processing and what are we accepting? Last year we made a new we met a new record high throughput. We put 75,000 tons of organic waste through that facility. 75,000 tons. If you drive along the Alberta highway, see a tanker truck, 25, 30 tons, right? So do the math on 75,000 tons, then you know that we're processing significant amount of material. We have a rule in place that we were actually pushing, and that's something that has changed with some regulatory agencies. We were able to do that. We have to keep 50% of our feedstock must be sourced from livestock manures. If we do that, then we can land apply the end product under AOPA rules, which is the Agricultural Operations Practice Act, which is a big thing for us. So half of the 75,000 has to be livestock manure, and then the other half comes from industrial processing, food processing. All the food processing, I mean, we like our steak and we like our sausage and we like our chicken. We don't talk about what's coming out of the back end of those plants that produce those. There's a lot of solid and liquid waste material that would either end up maybe in wastewater, mostly in landfill, that now can go through a different source. That's the balance there in food processing residues. We have probably 15 different suppliers of product that come to our facility or where we pick up. How do we try to make money, right? We're trying to, well, we're doing electricity, which is not fun these days because the 2 cents was mentioned here a couple of times. I make that point every time when I'm in a conference and I say, you know, energy is just too cheap here. These things don't work at that level. And people will come at me and say, you know what, my power bill is rising constantly, so something's wrong here. But we have to look at what we're paying for. We as a generator of power, we get paid what the power pool price is. And the bulk of your bill as a consumer, these days probably 70, 80% or even more, it's not related to the energy if you have the right contract. It's related to transmission and distribution and administration fees, which makes energy efficiency, David, really tough, because as long as you're connected to that grid, right, you're still paying for those energy, these non-energy related charges. So power is one thing. We get paid in a lot of situations as we're providing an alternative for landfill disposal, what's called a tipping fee for these products. We have an offset project in the Alberta offset system, so we're creating carbon offsets that can be used for compliance from the large emitters. We're fortunate with our lobbying group in the bioenergy sector. We got a renewed bioenergy producer program, at least for this year, or for the bulk of this year, that supplements these things with 6 cents. We are working on a long-term strategy with the province to make these things more happen often, and for the next guys not to run through a 10-year cycle and reduce it to 5 maybe. What I don't have in here, we made one mistake when we set up the business model. We did not right away charge for tourist groups and visitors. If I would have done that, and that's not a joke, we would probably make significant revenue. We are touring busloads of people to that facility that are just interested, curious what this is all about and stuff like that. Some of my time is devoted to that. If we talk about greenhouse gas benefits here, just look at these numbers. We have to compare ourselves against a grid, so-called grid intensity factor, which is set by Alberta Environment at 0.59 tons of CO2 equivalents per megawatt hour. You can debate that factor, because I don't think it truly represents the mix that we're having at this point in the Alberta grid, but that's what we have to compare ourselves against. You see what we're having. We just had to go through a life cycle assessment about the emissions that we create, producing the electricity, very minute. There is other facilities. If you look at the map, this is from our Alberta Bioenergy Producers Group that we came up with here in 2015. We are one, and there's one other facility that I called it ag-based plant, agriculture-based plant, with that plus 50% manure regulation. There's some more industrial plant that work on anaerobic digestion in the forestry sector. They are digesting pulp and paper residue. Good thing to do. They are larger in scale. But on the ag side, it's really a very scattered landscape. The other facility that is on that chart, Roadtech, it's a small potato-based operation that we have. It's about 20 minutes away from our facility. And then there's a couple orange named projects. These are the guys that come to me and say, am I ready yet? And I'm saying, no, you need 3 more years. So that's, but that's it, right? I mean, there's no other facilities. I have not counted wastewater treatment facilities that sometimes have anaerobic digestion. There's no real landfill gas yet. So that's really all. So that's why we have the bus loads, because it's unique. That came up a couple of times today, of course, in the political context of what we're doing these days. Everybody says to me, Stefan, that new government must be great for you. And I say, yeah, right direction, but the devil is always in the detail. We've heard about most of that. Just a couple examples here. The ASO program, right? Great thing, the ASO program. I was personally very surprised to read the rationale of the ASO when they put it out in November. They acknowledge the fact that the market is disturbed, there's too much risk, no capital is attracted, so the government has to step in if we want to make this work. And the ASO recommended a program design with an auction, and whatever the auction price is what you get, and whether you get it from the pool or from the government. If the pool is below that, the government will pay the difference. If the pool is actually above that, you will have an obligation to repay the government. And we'll see how that pans out. But back to biogas, this is a utility scale program that kicks in for utility scale projects that are bigger than 5 megawatts. I know very few biogas plants, and I've seen quite a few in the world that are larger than that. So for biogas, that did absolutely nothing. The next thing they did, they reviewed the microgeneration regulation. I don't know if you heard about microgeneration. Essentially, that is to facilitate that your meter can spin backwards. You get a credit on your utility bill if you have a solar, for example, solar installation at home, and you generate credits with your retailer, and you lower your power bill. They reviewed that microgeneration regulation. We were very hopeful that they somehow do something for biogas in that piece, because the microgen are not designed for net exporting facilities. I said before, we are putting 90% of what we're producing out into the grid. So we were hoping something's happening there. Nothing happened there. The new microgen on that piece looks like the old microgen. So again, we were a little disappointed. We got finally that temporary bioenergy producer program. And as David mentioned, for the energy efficiency, also those funds come out of the carbon tax. So I have this sun and light thing here. It's kind of like the Alberta weather, where you say, if you don't like it, wait 5 minutes. It's a little different here. If you wait 5 minutes, there's not a lot of happening. 2016 was the worst, by far, the worst year for any power producer in the province. We've seen, there's a couple of things that happened at once. We had these PPAs, the debate about PPAs, we had the historic lower power prices. So we had seen a couple plants closing because on a 2-cent power pool price, you can't make anything work. So that's why I'm saying, generally, conceptually, yes, the devil is in the detail. 2016 didn't work out so well. So we'll see how things go forward here in next little while. I'm going to conclude here. We made recommendations. The government of Alberta hired an expert to make recommendations on the long-term strategy, how to get bioenergy, biogas in particular, biofuels. How do we do with that long-term to see more of those? We made a couple recommendations here. The ASO program, I think, is a tremendous thing, except for the fact that we need that for smaller size facilities. Was one of the recommendations we need. The regulatory side, we were very adamant about that. If we want to really see these things happening, you cannot put people through a system where that's not set up for that. So you need to work on the system to accommodate these smaller scale facilities. Coincidentally, I have to say, a study was done that was supported by Alberta Innovates and the University of Alberta that came up, looked into the biogas topic, and they came up with a number here. If we use 30 to 50% of available organics in the province, we can generate 330 to 550 megawatt. So we can still debate in the power world. That's still not enough. That's still not a lot, but we would be very happy if we would come even close to those numbers in the next decade. So when I'm coming back to this wonderful venue here, I'm hoping to be able to report on a number of other facilities that actually made it, and not only about ours. So that was me. The real life story, what it takes to change things. I don't want to discourage anybody, but it's an interesting path.